What do we know about this Supreme Court with a big conservative 6-3 majority? What do we know about their inclination in general to be deferential to at least this president?
So, in my view, Mark, this is one of the big questions and arguably contradictions with the Supreme Court because you do have this theory of the unitary executive, which in theory, if you step back and take it as an academic exercise and don't apply a particular president's name to it, it should be a restraint on the power of the executive branch. And if the president's running the executive branch, it should be a restraint on him. I think in practice, it doesn't always play out that way. You've got a Supreme Court where the conservatives are very hostile to what they call agency power. And so they don't like it when the Consumer Financial Protection Board takes some action that might not be allowed under their law, under the governing law for that agency. And the Supreme Court will step in and try to block that. Where this sort of gets more complicated is the conservative justices don't seem as allergic to presidential exercises of power, especially if they can be claimed to be in the national security or foreign policy realm. And so there is something of a tension there. I don't see how you can completely slash back in a swashbuckling fashion the administrative state and let the president do whatever he wants at the same time. And you do see some of the liberals saying, gee, when Joe Biden took an expansive view of his policy, say to issue student loan relief, the Supreme Court stepped in immediately. And we'll see if this Supreme Court is willing to bring the same kind of power to bear against President Trump. We really have not seen much of that yet in the second term, although we did see a few instances of it in the first term.
So I won't say cynical, I'd say realistic about judges and justices. Not always. We saw this with the trade decision last week. But in general, I find them to be result oriented. I tend to think if they're Republican nominated, they vote mostly for Republicans. Not always, but when the chips are down, they do. That means that for President Trump to lose any of the big decisions before the Supreme Court, 3 of the Republican nominated justices would have to flip and vote against him, right? He's got to lose 3.
Two. I think he would have to lose 2, but
I'm sorry, 2, not 3.
Yeah,
on any given case. So it's 6. So it'd go from 6 to 3 to 5 to 4 against him.
Correct.
Bad at math. Which 2 are the weak links? If you just believe my theory, which 2 of the Republican nominated justices are the most likely to abandon him?
Well, I think it depends on the issue, but so far, Chief Justice John Roberts has shown that in a number of cases he is willing to step away.
And who's the other one?
So I think the other one becomes a toss-up, and it depends on the issue. If we were just rolling dice, I would say probably Amy Coney Barrett would be maybe the next most likely person. If you remember back on the Trump immunity decision, she didn't fully go along with the majority's opinion. I don't think it mattered in that particular case.
Right.
But she broke off there. And there have been a few other areas, decisions where she has frustrated conservatives. The other ones, I think you get to a lower probability. I still think the fact that Neil Gorsuch decided to rule that transgender rights and gay rights have been enforceable as a matter of federal law for the last 50 years. It's a pretty remarkable decision coming from a Trump-appointed conservative justice, which he did right, but you can't point to a lot of other outlier opinions like that where you get a really unexpected result.
I've been waiting for about 5 months for the New York Times to write a story about the White House counsel. Do you know who the White House counsel is?
Well, the White House counsel was, we wrote a bunch of stories at the very beginning.
Yeah. Well, they switched it. It's now a guy named David Warrington. Right. And I've been waiting for the New York Times to write a story because the conventional wisdom in the media is there's no one telling the president no as compared to the first term when he had a chief of staff. So literally 10 minutes before we started this interview, they ran their story after I've been waiting for it for 5 months.
Go. He's a former law partner of Harmeet Dillon, who runs the civil rights division.
So here's the headline and the subhead. White House counsel eases Trump's path on aggressive agenda. David Warrington, the top lawyer inside the West Wing, focuses on, quote, the art of the possible, as one Trump advisor said. What do you know about this guy? Because typically the president who wants to push the envelope on legal stuff, like executive orders and some of the other things he's done, would have a White House counsel who occasionally would at least tap the brakes. So what do you know about the role of this David Warrington figure?
Well, I mean, I know that he was when he was litigating, was an extremely conservative attorney, as was that entire Harmeet Dillon firm that fought a lot of the stuff in California around the pandemic. I have not heard of stories coming out of the White House as we heard Legion in the first term, where Trump was routinely clashing with his White House lawyers about what he could and couldn't do. And then he would replace them or ignore them or seemingly lock them in a closet somewhere so that he could bring in an outside attorney who is more to his liking. We've heard less of that this time. I haven't heard much word of dissent along that front at all. And so I have to assume that he is somehow navigating this without causing the degree of internal tension that erupted. And at the moment, you can't really argue with the performance. I mean, I don't know if it's Warrington or Sauer or who gets to take responsibility, but we talked about those 25 or so emergency appeals, Mark. The Trump administration has prevailed completely prevailed in maybe 20 of them, and partially prevailed in a few more. So the record in those cases has been almost impeccable on their part, which does suggest that they're doing a pretty good job of vetting things, especially when you look back at that first term where he had very sloppily done legal work on things like the travel ban, 7 days into the first administration, where there were clearly lawyers in the administration that knew there were problems with this, and it had to be rewritten, I think, 3 different times before the Supreme Court eventually blessed it at a point where everybody had kind of forgotten it even existed anymore.
It suggests some combination of they're less sloppy and they're doing good work, and the court is sympathetic to them. I mean, you don't have that kind of one-loss record if you're not appealing to at least a pretty sympathetic audience, right?
Yeah, I think that's part of it. Although we're not seeing like a lot of the conservative justices break off. It doesn't seem like they view a lot of these decisions as close calls. And some of them, you even see some of the liberal justices go along. So you're right. It is a combination of perhaps a friendlier playing ground than they had the first time around, although they still had the court leaning in their direction from the very beginning.
Back in 2020, people on the American left pushed very hard to get children's books into schools, getting all sorts of titles onto the bookshelves. Things like Activist Baby, Woke Baby, Anti-Racist Baby, and Non-Binary Baby. Well, our new sponsor thought if we're doing the whole political kids books thing, we shouldn't leave out a book called Capitalist Baby. So here you go. Capitalist Baby, a fun illustrated A to Z kids book, is now on sale at Amazon.com. Capitalist Baby is a beautifully illustrated, it's a little tongue-in-cheek, and a clever A to Z book for kids and parents who love business and capitalism. Best part is this: Capitalist Baby is optimistic. It celebrates the ideas of an American entrepreneurship and business. It is instructive without any preaching. Real business concepts are woven into the charming text and into the illustrations. Capitalist Baby is your alternative to the leftist kids book so popular after 2020. Buy Capitalist Baby now for yourself, your kids, and as a gift. It's a delightful read that deserves a spot on your bookshelf. For the first time in human history, there's an A to Z alphabet book for people who believe in free enterprise, entrepreneurship, and commerce. So right now, go buy a copy or buy 3. Search Capitalist Baby on Amazon.com today.